Well, hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Strine, and welcome to the Rittenhouse Square Fine Art Show in New York City. It's a shame that we can't all be in the park in Rittenhouse Square in Philly at this time, but it's also pretty cool that as art patrons, you can visit the artists and see where we work and how we work, and maybe get to know one another a little differently at this time. So you're joining me in downtown Manhattan. We're all up on the 41st floor, overlooking Uptown and over the East River, over the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, surrounded by glass, so I have some awesome natural light to paint in. I have inspiring views every day. Maybe if there's time after this presentation, I'll be able to share some spectacular views, but my primary goal today is to share my painting process. A little bit of background first. I'm originally from Delaware. I went to school in Florida for fine arts and education with an emphasis on painting. I've been drawing and painting all my life, and I've always focused on people. It feels magical to me to create life from two dimensions. And my work feels especially meaningful to me at this time. I work to capture and convey the range and the depths of human relationships. And even though we're all unique beings, we share a lot of the same values, family and friendships and community and pride and security and love of self and others. And so I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to add my support to the fight for equal rights and civil rights. And so I've pledged to donate a percentage of any art sales from this show to the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. So thank you for sharing support for that. So I work to share human feelings and values when I paint, and the settings are places that inspire me. They can be from my past or my present or my imagination. I have bodies of work from that are beach settings, urban settings, places that I've traveled. The settings may differ, but I always mean to evoke the human experience. And so that's what I do. What I'd like to do today is demonstrate how I paint. I use oil paints. I paint on canvas. I will direct this towards my canvas. I use, this is a linen canvas. It's been stretched on a frame structure and then prepared with gesso first. Gesso is a combination of acrylic, chalk, and white pigment, and it is meant to seal off the surface of the canvas so that it's the oil paint isn't absorbed right into it. Sometimes I like to tint it so it's not a stark white canvas to begin with. In this case, you can see there's a gray background. That's because I mixed some neutral gray acrylic paint into the gesso in order to prepare the surface. Once it's prepared, I sketch in charcoal directly onto the canvas. Because we've got limited time today, I'm both using a photo reference, and I also began to develop the drawing a bit. As much as I love to draw, this is a demonstration of painting, so I didn't want to take all the time to develop the drawing first. So I've brought it fairly far along. I have a lot of practice of drawing and painting anatomy and faces and figures, so I have confidence in that, and that allows me to be kind of more free and expressive when I do my own work. For this demonstration, I chose a simple single subject If you take a look at the painting that is hanging just behind this setup, you can see kind of a more complex setting, and the focus once more on the people, and the setting is there to kind of tell the story. So that's how I approach my work. As I began in my introduction, I'm gonna work a little bit on this while I talk some more. As I began my introduction, I was saying that my work is all about human relationships. So I'm always striving to create a connection with the viewer, and that's done with poses, expressions, compositions, colors, even brush strokes are very intentional. So I have actually been dying to get into this. Once I got the drawing started, that's all I wanted to do was keep working on it. So it's a pleasure to now be able to get back into this piece. I started it just a couple of days ago. What I'm doing is going back into the shadow areas first, in order to give this form. We'll be doing that again as we begin to paint. It is important to remember when I talk about form, this being a head, I'm always thinking about the structure of a skull, and the entire anatomy. You know, the neck is holding the weight of the head. So that is very important. That is very important. There's a shape to the skull. We know that, you know, eyes are resting back inside a socket. There's a jawbone. All those things will be further defined in paint. But those are the kind of things that I want to begin to emphasize in the drawing. I actually learned this technique from an artist from the Art Student League of New York, whose work I really admire. Her name is Robin Smith. She does amazing figurative work, and I was doing some work at the Art Students League in her studio, and picked up on this. It speaks to me because I love to draw, and it's a fun way to get the piece started, because you've almost completed two originals. You know, once in the drawing, kind of experiencing that, enjoying that, getting happy with it. And then on to painting and enhancing that and making it another new original. So a neat process. There are some strong highlights in this image, what makes it kind of a striking photo. And we'll really want to emphasize those in paint. So the drawing is actually pretty developed enough that we can paint. If I were to just begin to paint on this, it's very vulnerable. You know, chalk. I could smear this right off with very little effort. So I actually fix it with hairspray, and I'm just going to do a real quick pass over it for two reasons. I would ordinarily take this either outdoors or to another very well ventilated room, so that we're not smelling in hairspray. But it is also we're going to be, you know, painting on it quickly, sparingly. There isn't a lot of risk of it bleeding or getting too messy, and I don't want to lose my cameraman, so enough of the hairspray. We can move on to the painting. Again, back to the fumes, there may be some preconceived notions about oil painting being dangerous or smelly or toxic. It actually used to be. Some time ago, we worked with turpentine and other things that you don't want to breathe in, certainly not in a closed room. It is much safer now. There are different products for medium additives and cleanup that are entirely safe, and so that is not a problem any longer. Pardon me? I want to mention one other thing, that oil paints and supplies are not inexpensive, and so you want to be you don't want to waste them. And I have a super easy method of setting out my paints and storing them and reusing them that I can share. I use a paper palette. Let me swing this across. This will be showing some mixing and the palette. Apologize, it's a little lopsided now. This is a paper palette. And I actually squeeze the paint out onto it. It's where I do my mixing. When I'm done for the day, I tear off this sheet, I fold it into quarters, I put it into a Ziploc bag, and I put it in the freezer. And then it is there for me the next day to get back started. I love the solution because it's portable and it's not wasteful. And just happy to pass along these tips. I'm going to begin with working the dark areas first, establishing the form. I use a dark brown, Van Dyke brown, with a little ultramarine blue mixed in. Oh, cool. People are saying where they're from. Kutztown. I know Kutztown. Hey, while I'm painting, feel free to chime in. It is always interesting to find out where people are coming from, so maybe a prize for the person furthest away. Feel free to chime in with conversation or questions or anything that you have on your mind. So I'm sorry, I was saying I use dark brown, Van Dyke brown, and ultramarine blue. I use that instead of black because I feel that mixing color for a foundation has more depth rather than just working with black and shades of gray. I also work with fairly light applications, and I build up. So, back to the light stuff.
Chuck said he's using the same type of palette.
What's that?
Chuck said he uses the same type of palette.
Oh, no kidding. How about that? So it wasn't a secret. I have a fellow artist who uses the same paper palette. And I actually, I will run out of frozen food before I ever run out of the Ziploc paint bags in my freezer. I have them all the time.
Mark and Jay said, greetings from Brooklyn.
Ah, hi guys. Sorry, no prize for you. You're just over the river. So feel free to ask questions if you're an artist. Talk to me about what you do. If you're an aspiring artist, tell me what you'd like to learn to do. As I mentioned, I went to school for both fine arts and education, so I love to teach, and we've all gotten very comfortable now with both learning and teaching online. So I can teach art from New York City. If that's something that interests you, feel free to reach me. we are on the Rittenhouse Square Art Show Facebook page, but you can find me on Facebook too, Sharon Strine Art, or my website, the same name, or on Instagram. Feel free to reach out for any reason. I'm happy to give you more tips on painting, any product names. Sometimes people will ask more specific questions about what kind of pigments you use, or what kind of brushes, that sort of thing. While I mentioned brushes, I should say it's super important to take care of brushes. Good brushes are not cheap, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You want to take care of them and not mix with them. I can do some mixing for the camera in a short bit to show how that's done. It's tempting to mix with your brush, but you don't want to do that because you'll wear them out, wear them down really quickly.
Which brand of paint do you prefer?
That's always a good question. There are so many paints of excellent quality. How I decide what paint to use, and the answer to that is there's not one brand, and the reason for that is that they vary. The actual colors will vary between brands. I only have a number of Gamblin pigments on my palette today. But what I've found is, I mentioned the foundation color that I use, Van Dyke Brown. It is an entirely different color in one brand of paint than another. One is much cooler than the other. It is most apparent when you start making values of it. If you begin with the strong dark brown color, they look pretty much the same. As you begin making values of it, adding white to it or adding light colors to it, you'll see that one's much warmer than the other. So the short answer to that is I've done lots of experimenting, and I find my favorites based on the color. Some paints are more light fast than others. That has more to do with the pigment that makes up that color than the brand. So hope I answered that sufficiently.
Bridget says hello from LA.
Ah, okay, Bridget, you're the furthest away. You may win the prize. Ask Bridget if this subject looks familiar. This actually, I'm painting from a photo of my son. And this is a real celebration of hair. I have 3 kids. They're grown adults. This is Connor when he was a child, so I'll have some fun with this part of the painting as I get into color too. So I really wanted to establish those darks. What I also feel like I need to share, which is probably of interest to most, is mixing skin tones. I prepared some on the palette. I can also do a little bit of demonstrating, although that takes some time, but I'll just do a little bit just to show what I'm talking about as I describe. There's a basic palette called the Zorn palette. It's Z-O-R-N, and that is in reference to a Swedish artist from the late 1800s, early 1900s. I think he lived until 1920. Anders Zorn. He was a Swedish artist, and he is known for portraits and nudes, a lot of times in outdoor settings. He used this limited palette, and it's limited to just 4 colors. It is, see if you can see when I'm pointing to these. It is yellow ochre, white, ivory black, and cadmium red, which is probably out of view. And all of this was made from those colors. I began with the pure yellow ochre and added white. It takes a very little bit of pigment that changes the white color very drastically. So you want to, start in very small measure of pigment to white. So that's the first shade. In order to create the entire range, some people pre-mix the whole thing before they get started. I do a little bit of pre-mixing, but I tend to kind of mix as I go, as I'm seeing and responding what I'm building. I did this for the purpose of presentation. So that is the pure yellow ochre and white. You also take the yellow ochre and add a little bit of the cadmium red. Creates that one. Again, the yellow ochre and a little bit more of the cadmium red. Oh, that's too much. Red's a really strong pigment, so much less needed. Okay, so those are the kind of the base colors to begin with. You then do the next value of that, lighter value of that, with lots of white and a little bit of each of those. That's that row. The next step is to take white, little bit of the ivory black, create a gray. And then with that gray, you go across here and take this now into the gray. That creates this next color. Then you mix a little bit darker shade of gray. That creates the next color, a little bit darker, the next color. So from the yellow ochre, we're building values from light to dark and adding black basically to it. And then this one that had the yellow ochre and a little bit of the cadmium red, again doing values of it. This one has a little bit more of the cadmium red, values to that, and this was pure cadmium red, white, gray, darker gray, darker gray. So from that, you have pretty much the range. I will admit I can't resist adding other colors when I'm doing skin tones. You see blue shadows, some green in shadows. Can't help but make more out of that. But you really can't go wrong with this as a basic palette for skin tones. So I hope that departure was helpful.
Lila says, I love how expressive the face is.
Ah, thank you. Thank you, folks. Thanks for chiming in. It's always helpful to get some feedback. I can talk on and on, but I'd much rather have a conversation. So I'm going to start working on some face here. So that charcoal is actually bleeding a little bit, but that's okay. The wonderful thing, one of the wonderful things about working in oil paints is you can always paint over. In fact, I have painted over entire canvases. If I'm not in love with what I've done, I will set it aside for a while. When I'm sure that I don't love it, then I'll just prime right over it, gesso right over it, and use that canvas for something new. But in less drastic cases, you can paint, let it dry, and then paint over, and either completely take something out, or alter it until you're happy with it. Not the case with things like watercolor, for sure. Watercolor, it's kind of once and done. I think oil paints are much more forgiving in that way. So I went right to the bright spots, just to kind of make it pop. I would ordinarily approach this in the same way that we approach the drawing, with the dark stuff first, but I wanted to be able to show some real progress here. This is also a good time to give a shout out to my fellow artists. For those of you who were tuned in earlier and maybe heard David Oleski, he was the artist that was right before me. David's a friend and a fellow board member of the Rittenhouse Square Fine Arts Association, really talented artist, and a very gifted writer too. The artist following me at 2 o'clock, Alice Vandervenen, does some really cool work. She was a neighboring artist at the Gracie Square show here in New York City a couple of years ago. And I really like her work. So if you've got the time, tune back in at 2 today. That's Eastern time, Bridget. Check back to the Rittenhouse Square Facebook page for more demonstrations through the weekend. And there are also, I don't know if you can still get any reservations to them, but there were Zoom presentations being done too. We at the Rittenhouse board are really excited about being able to do this virtual show. It was just heartbreaking to not be able to have the show in Philly, and this has been a really worthwhile thing to do. How's this showing up? I'm working pretty light.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll go a little darker. This makes me think of something else to mention. Something I like to do when I'm doing skin, wherever it touches, wherever skin meets skin, I like to put red, just to kind of indicate warmth, heat. I'm making it pretty distinct at first, and I just did that to remind me to go back to that. But it makes sense to me to it kind of brings it to life. There is heat when skin touches skin, and I translate that into color. Since today is really strictly demonstration, other than the piece that's hanging behind me, I'm not really sharing a lot of my other artwork. So I would direct you to my website. Have a look at my other work. If you see something you like, reach out to me. I am for the Rittenhouse show. I am offering work for no cost in shipping, and for the larger stuff, that's pretty significant. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. Okay, I want to see some red. To get some blending going on here. Any questions?
People are just enjoying their painting.
Good. I feel like we should have music. Anybody else listen to music when they're doing their art or podcasts? For a while, I was on a tear listening to podcasts, and then I felt the need for quiet again. This is fun. Bringing my boy back to life. Back to childhood, I should say. He's alive.
Chris says, I like the vertical palette placement. Haven't seen that before.
Yeah, I was really afraid it was going to drip. But, another good thing about oil paints, they're thick. And this is actually pretty easy to do it this way.
What podcast do you like?
Oh my, let's not get political. I was an avid listener of, Pod Save America, Pod Save the World. I guess I already showed that card, didn't I?
Where's your palette usually?
Usually by my side, and horizontally. Although, well, I should say, kind of depends on where I am. I mentioned the Art Students League in Uptown, New York, and they had different setups there. Depending on the class, they could be very crowded, and you wouldn't have much room. So you just kind of respond to the situation, and you can hold it, or you can set it beside you. I'm liking this solution though. It's nice to be able to go back and forth. I'm dying to get back into that hair. Any suggestions? Anybody want to see me work somewhere else? Oh, one thing that I probably should do, again, because this is such a celebration of hair, you'll notice in this image there's, can you see the image still? Yeah. There's a kind of a halo of light, very strong light source from back here, began to indicate that here. And in order to define the hair, that is, that's showing as a form of light, I'm going to need a background color. So I could do that next and do it really loosely, just to have some definition there. How are we doing on time?
You have about 10 minutes left.
10 minutes? Wow. All right. All right, you're just going to have to tune back in to see this thing done. How do we do that? Now, I'll get it done and I'll post it. So, another reason to find me on Facebook or my website or et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, don't really need this any longer. No, I want that top color. All right. We're starting to get light on time, folks. What else do you want to know? I'll be honest with you, I was thinking, I was not really looking forward to talking the whole time I was painting, because painting for me is kind of my quiet time. But I enjoy this. This has been fun. I enjoy sharing. I enjoy getting feedback. I enjoy the making connections with my art. Okay. I'm gonna put a hint of this in here too.
Do you ever do any compositions without people?
Oh, yes, I have, and I've had success with them. I had some commissioned pieces that were kind of cityscapes, and let's see what other examples. Oh, I've done. I've actually done a lot of animals, which are also fun. So yeah, the answer to that is yes. I think what I'm most known for, however, and what I'm most practiced at, because I love doing it, is people. I have played with kind of different styles, and I think that's important to keep things fresh in that way. If you see my work on my website, there are pieces that are from kind of a vintage beach setting series, and they are kind of light and bright and white canvases and almost kind of sepia tone. And I did lots and lots of them, and I still do them sometimes. That they're quite different from something like this. I've been kind of steadily doing these kind of urban scenes lately. Something that I'm inspired by. I feel like we're running out of time. Is that right?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Well, I'm obviously going to keep working on this, and I would encourage everyone to spend some time going back to the Rittenhouse Square website, Rittenhouse Square art website. Check out all of the artists there. Not just the ones who are doing the presentations this weekend, but there are 143 artists who have brought some beautiful work to the Rittenhouse Square many shows in a row, and we were happy to bring it all online for them and for you this time. And we're hoping to be back in Rittenhouse Square in September. Hope to see you then. Actually hope to hear from you even before then. So again, feel free to reach out to me, and thanks very much for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.